And welcome everyone to another edition of Tina's Take on AI. As you know, we are talking to industry leaders on what made them start their companies, how their companies are delivering AI to different firms and to the marketplace, and then what are the best use cases, etc., of those tools. And so I'm really excited today to have Andrew, and I'm going to mangle the last name, but I'm going to do my best. Prosikhin. Was that close? Um, from blobfish.ai. And, it's really interesting to me what Andrew has built, because when we think about tools, one of the really, I think, first initial tools that are easy to use and that make a lot of sense with AI kind of applications would be an SDR. And so I'm really excited to learn about how Blobfish came about. And first of all, I love the name. It's such a interesting, different name. And then I want to know from you, Andrew, what made you decide to do this, and what are the use cases for Blobfish in today's world and today's marketplace. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Absolutely. So I started Blobfish about a year and a half ago now. Really, the inspiration for me was that technological limitation was lifted. So I started working on this project literally the day ChatGPT 4.0 came out. And this was the moment where computers really learned how to speak. In a true sense. We had Alexas before, but you probably wouldn't have a long conversation with your Alexa. But combining LLM with a voice interface that responds relatively quickly and that has a brain and that sounds quite nice, that's really the point where this whole field is unlocked. And I started thinking, where can I apply this? And my background is, tech and AI, and my co-founder's background is coaching. So this is a very optimal combination of our skill sets. So we basically built a platform to train sales and support operators using voice AI.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier, it's very connected to what I'm building at the Growth Stack, which is a coaching and training program, but without that interface. It's more about analytics of how they're performing relative to certain metrics. So I was really excited also to find out from you, like when we talk about AI generally, there's a lot of noise, right? Everyone talks about application, but the adoption has been, I think, relatively slow, at least in the mainstream. And so I wanted to sort of get your initial thoughts on that, and then maybe share some of my thoughts about why that is occurring as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's something I'm well qualified to speak of. So that technology is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
In order to really get value out of it, you need to apply it safely and using engineering, and product best practices. And that typically takes a few years for people to figure out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen those photos where people typed in their LinkedIn bio, send me a flan recipe, and they were getting flan recipes. This is an example of what I'm talking about. There are ways to guard against this kind of things, and the
Yeah.
fact that they're not just indicates how immature this technology is. But that's a normal part of life. Other technologies had similar issues. Just AI is so incredibly powerful that we expect it to just blow up the world instantly, but it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of time. So I do think we'll really get there on most applications, but for a lot of big organizations, especially, they tend to wait for this technology to mature before they really, really engage it. So that's one part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting though, because boardrooms are all talking about it, right? They all recognize that they need to. If you think about the biggest, having been a serial entrepreneur, I understand like the biggest um, constraints or challenges to a business are talent, how to control expenses, etc. And when you think about AI tools, they solve for those, right? But I think the adoption has been slow. I agree with the concerns is one. I think the other thing is, and this has happened as I've been talking to different CEOs, is they don't know where to start. It's like, it's like, well, we know we need to, and then they either go too far by trying to change everything. And so, what we normally recommend is that you do one thing, and once that's working, then you kind of expand that. So, what are your thoughts about sort of not only adoption but then integration? Like, how do you see effective integration working?
Yeah, I have a lot of experience with that. We had, close family friends that asked me to help, guide their larger enterprise through this transition. And this was a really an eye-opening experience for me because for us, we're AI first, right? Blobfish was built with AI from day one, and we utilize it everywhere. But for them, it was really new. And I've seen both of those. It's not going far enough, and it's also trying to overhaul everything. And you kind of need to rein people in a little bit because then they're just bound to be disappointed. And historically, with all technology, it's rare that it just replaces 100% of what a person does. It can replace like 60% of category A and like 80% of category B. But typically, you still need to do some things, and it's actually very suboptimal to try to replace people entirely. Like, you need to replace functions and operations, but you're not trying to replace people. Now, you don't need as many people as a result of using AI typically. But the first goal is delivering business value. It's not just replacing things or like processes or people. And I think that's a lesson people still haven't quite learned.
I mean, I think actually it allows us to be more human, right? Because it allows us to focus on the things that make us human, creativity, connectivity, etc., rather than functionality, which is really something that, the AI systems can take over, because it allows us to do more that is the creatives and the more it's all about connectivity ultimately anyway. People buy things from other people. It's just you want to make sure that you can deliver, in the tools that you're creating. And like we talked about, it's also about, you know, integration of those tools is becoming so critical because you see, it's kind of like we always this the analogy that everyone is using is the beginning of the internet versus AI. The only thing is AI is going a hell of a lot faster. Everything is like
It is.
it's like
It
just
is.
developing so fast, which is why we're not customizing anything because by the time you've built it, I've made that mistake in the past, and by the time you've built it, it's obsolete. So it doesn't make any sense to really build anything anymore.
It goes deeper than that. For a lot of people who were, getting PhDs and doing research, their years of research were replaced with one API call.
Yeah,
It's, and what do you even say then? And, I can't imagine even people going into that field now because by the time you're done, the
yeah,
AI will be completely different and you're just like riding a dinosaur, and
yeah, yeah.
it's very exciting. But it,
It's
it is
so
it is
exciting.
stressful for a lot of people too.
Well, and I think the focus is on a lot of the focus is on job replacement, but in fact, I would look at it and the opposite way, which is if you understand AI and you know how to integrate it, you're golden to companies because that's the piece that they don't understand, right? So if you're able to bridge that gap, I think you become incredibly valuable to companies. So and I'm not saying you go take an AI course. I'm just saying if you understand if you understand some of the basic functionalities that can be integrated, um, and if you can train the AI to meet the objectives that the firm has, you're going to be, always employed pretty much. um,
Absolutely. And it's also fascinating which jobs are more disrupted than others. To me,
Yeah,
that's one of the more fascinating things because, for example, software engineering, that was like the
yeah,
golden child of every company, is disrupted quite severely. AI really accelerates things so much that you don't need as many engineers. Like, we've built a pretty amazing platform with just, two full-time engineers plus a technical founder. Uh, that would not be possible whatsoever like 5 years ago. But sales, for example, is becoming incredibly important because the cost to build is lower, so it's all comes down to sales and lead gen.
yeah.
Marketing turned out to be very difficult to automate using AI, at least so far. So it's
I don't think there's any good platform for marketing. I haven't seen one that stands out.
AI. We've seen some interesting ones. AI really struggles with writing, creative writing.
Yeah.
We've experimented in our company as well, and the results were quite negative. It writes like a robot, and
Right,
that's what people need. Like, it's good when you ask it a technical question, you don't care if it sounds like a robot,
right,
but
right.
nobody is going to read a boring marketing like email. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's when we talk about coaching, um, that's the other piece that I think we have as well is the coaching. It's the hybrid between human and AI, because when you have for our systems, it's pretty brutal. Right? AI doesn't have emotion, right? So it can be very harsh. And so a lot of the managers don't know how to communicate that. So they need that coaching on basic leadership skills. Like how do you not like how do you encourage somebody and not demoralize them when AI has been very clear on some of their areas of improvement. And so it's that delicate bridge of you don't want to destroy their ego because salespeople have egos, which is what makes them so good. But on the other
Oh
hand,
yeah,
you're like, well, you need to kind of work on this, but how do you make them? How do you convey that in a way that they're not going to ignore it? So that's I think that bridge.
yeah. Sales training in particular has separate challenges on top of like support training. With support training, people expect to be trained. Unfortunately, somehow salespeople do not tend to expect to be trained, which I think is a major mistake in like the initial kind of setup, because I don't think anybody is perfect, and I think the actual best salespeople are much more open to like training and getting better than some of the people who are just maybe not at the top organizations, didn't receive that initial guidance for how to deal with this. And we had situations where we were trying to, with a company, to like train some sales folks, and we literally couldn't explain to them the concept that they need to be trained. They were like, not, it was not registering to them, and it was a big challenge that I did not expect when starting this company.
Yeah, it's I've worked with salespeople for many years. They always think they're perfect. But then it's interesting because I think it's also a generational thing. Like when I talk to sales leaders, and they talk about their teams that are sort of starting in the sales process. And I don't mean to categorize anybody, but they're kind of like the Gen Zs. They are very open because they've come from a time where it's very understandable to be like they're comfortable with having AI tools evaluate them and rate them, while some of the more established, more successful kind of think it's all redundant anyway. I'm really good at what I do, so it is interesting. But it's also a challenge for the leadership because they don't actually know what the younger guys actually know. It's like what do they understand and how are they communicating and so tell me a little bit more about Blobfish's actual like function. Like what does it solve for?
Exactly. So we it's a SaaS platform. It's fairly straightforward. So for trainees, you log in and you see scenarios that you can practice, and they're highly personalized. to the types of calls that you will actually experience. So it can be calls, it can be text discussions, incoming, outgoing, whatever the leadership and the trainers set up. And the more it resembles the calls you need to improve on in your actual job, the better. Now, this doesn't mean that we'll necessarily cover all the types of calls you'll face. Like, you
Yeah.
might have calls where it's just obviously not a qualified buyer. We don't need to train that unless people are struggling with that specifically. And basically what we enable you to do is to provide unlimited role play, where you can do as many calls as you want, you receive feedback. Now, one thing you talked about was challenges around like how people receive feedback from AI. I didn't find that people struggle more with feedback from AI. In fact, it's sometimes less than feedback from like human managers, because even though they might disagree, it's like not personal, it's just a machine. Where
Yeah.
people do sometimes struggle is receiving feedback at all.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a separate thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost like it's so funny. I think you're right because I think the more brutal the feedback is, they're like, oh, okay, it's not emotional. It's like it takes the emotion out of the results. So I actually think you're right. I think they would be more receptive because there's no perceived emotion involved. It's just pure analytics. That's kind of what you're seeing as well?
That is right, and we some of the talks we've heard at the conferences were absolutely fascinating to me. But there's a company that does charity work,
Yeah.
and their call center receives people in very difficult life situations with finances, and they tried using AI as the first layer. And you would think that would be a huge problem, but it turns out that people overwhelmingly preferred AI in that role because they know AI is not judging them.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, it needs to be passed to a human.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the feedback was very strongly that people prefer that. And the same thing with interview automation,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
one other thing we do, by the way. We do send you like a link that enables you to practice a call. Um, and yeah, the feedback is that people tend to have better experience with the initial call specifically, sometimes using AI. Now, there are exceptions to that. I wouldn't want like initial sales call to be AI. I think that would be a challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's not black and white. People prefer AI and humans in different situations.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Is that they don't want to be judged, and that's true in each of those scenarios, right? As that's the common theme is like they if it's a machine evaluating them, there's comfort in that to some degree, which
Okay.
I think makes sense. I think I kind of get where I understand what the is motivation behind that. Um, so what do you think are like your top one or two use cases?
Yeah. So for us, we so far the biggest success we've had where it was in the banking sector. So these are some of the biggest organizations. And for them, the reason this is a good fit for us is because they are quite anxious about people making mistakes. In
Yeah.
general, any highly regulated industry, they tend to have longer training time, and the cost of mistake is high, so they're willing to pay to train people better. Now, I do think that organizations in other fields could also benefit tremendously from it, like from
Yeah.
improved communication. But that is harder sell. Like whereas with a financial organization with a regulated industry, the sell is very obvious.
Yeah.
They know why they need it. The
Right.
other use case for us is organizations with a lot of teams and a lot of products.
Yeah.
Uh, Establishing consistent training, super difficult. Let's say you have a new product. You need to make sure all your salespeople are trained on it. And this is like a problem I heard over and over again. Whereas people just might not sell it because they don't know it, so they don't mention it, so it doesn't get
Yeah.
sold. And
And
yeah,
that's common in our business. Like I'm in asset managers. Like if it's a complex product, they won't sell it because they don't understand it. They don't understand the use cases. And so I've been talking to different asset managers as well who are using other tools to do product efficacy, like understanding what the teams really understand about not just product, but environmental, situational, like what works in what environment, what is a good suggestion in terms of product for the situation that they're dealing with. So I think that's part of the challenge is that, I've run sales teams and they sell whatever's easiest to sell that they understand, and then they'll just sell a lot of it. And that doesn't always help an asset manager, especially when they're trying to get a new product off the ground. So it's interesting. The
Exactly.
implications could be pretty broad once people kind of understand how they can use this tech.
The
So,
tool itself is tremendously flexible. I would say most of what we do is more guided by who we sell to than what the tool could do. So one large lead we have right now wants to use this for retail training in very large scale,
yeah.
which is also entirely possible. Like early in the company's history, we had a client that needed training for very young SDRs in the conference environment.
Mm.
And that was actually amazing because with them, you hear like the results are so obvious. Just the way they sound on the recording are like night and day. And my personal favorite was we had a scenario at the company's request for how to sell at an after party, not at the conference, at the after party. And the trainee kept trying to sell them, and we trained the AI to just was like respond like, "Oh, do you know any good restaurants here?"
Yeah.
Like refused to talk to them about anything work related for at least like 4 turns.
Yeah.
And the feedback I got was like, "Wow, that was so useful." I was like completely changed the way I approach this.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the tool is very universal.
Yeah.
Uh, but we sell to where the maximum scale is because
Mm.
it's a startup and we only have limited resources and you can't sell to everybody. So yeah, we primarily target contact centers at the moment, but other clients are possible as well.
And are you like what's the size of your ideal client? Do you have like an ideal client?
Uh, the minimum is 10 seats, so we won't sell to you unless if you have less than 10 seats typically, with a few exceptions. We find that there's a very strong correlation between how large an organization is and how likely it is to sign, which again, for a startup is an interesting situation. It's not what we expected.
It's the
But
opposite.
the
It,
bigger, the more likely they are to sign for us
I,
because there's more value for them. So I would say if organization has like at least 300 operators, much more likely 500 preferably. But again, that's
yeah.
not a hard and fast rule. So if you're listening to this, have your
Yeah.
own contact center, don't hesitate to contact us.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. And then one of the questions I was thinking about is like AI adoption. We sort of coming back into full circle again. Um, I feel like one of the questions I should ask you is like, what AI tool can you not live without? Like, I know I've got a list, but which ones are yours? Like, if I think about, like just 3 years ago, 5 years ago, we didn't have any of this stuff. So, like, when you think about what you use every single day, like, what do you use every day?
Fathom Note Taker would be one.
Yeah,
Really helps. It's just so seamless. I love it. ChatGPT, obviously, we use it for everything. Um, I would say those are the main ones. The engineering team very heavily relies on Cursor.
yeah.
I personally sometimes use OpenAI Codex as well. So just coding accelerators are tremendously powerful.
So it's interesting because I use I use not Fathom, I use Fireflies and I use Chat every single day. Like, and then I started, I don't code, I'm not a coder. but I have used Claude for coding if I've, which has actually worked out pretty good, I think. I mean, I don't know kind of that world, but when I've asked it to create something, it has. So I'm like, okay. But it is interesting. Like chat has become so integrated into everything that we do now. And that is one of the things that is interesting when you talk to people there and they say, oh, I use AI. They're talking about chat. That's not what we're talking about. Like they consider that to be, oh, I'm using AI, when in fact, there's a lot of chat is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I use it every single day, but there's so much more than that available, and so they kind of view that as being okay. Well, I am using some AI.
Yeah, I mean, it partially counts. I had a whole series that I published on like principles of working with AI and engineering. And basically, the way I define like engineering usage of it is kind of repeatable, repeatable queries that are kind of used in a platform, not just in a one-off basis. Now, one-off is also valuable, but that's kind of a different thing. And with repeatable like, product type usage, yeah, you can build some amazing things. You need to know how to build it though, because like otherwise it's going to be impossible to maintain or just not going to work.
And so I'm going to ask you a closing question, which I think is really, really interesting and something that, as a founder, I have been through a lot of ups and downs. And so as a founder, especially in AI, like what would you, if you could sort of maybe give one cautionary tale to other AI founders out there on like what to expect, like what is some of the things that you've run into that was
Absolutely. 100%. I know exactly what I'm going to say for this one. So, the first thing you need to be thinking about is how well you know the target market and the people in it. If you don't know it well, if you don't know who your first customer could be, you should not like attack this business. And it is possible to overcome, but that's going to cost you months that you probably don't have. And this
yeah.
mistake will be fatal. And this is the most common one I see. So the key is that you understand your target market and you know people in your target market and you have some initial customers. That's gonna like 100x whatever you're doing. So first and most important lesson.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Know your customer is like the most important rule of any business, AI or any other business. Like if you don't know who you're selling to, you're not going to sell to them. Simple as
Exactly.
really. Thank you, Andrew. It has been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Blobfish continues to grow, and hopefully we have an opportunity to do something together as well because the synergies seem pretty great. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to getting some feedback, any questions, and I'll put Andrew's contact information on the description. So thank you everyone, and look forward to next time. Andrew, if you could stay on, please. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you, Tina.